Currently, ape fever is writhing through the nation. Or more accurately, the new Planet of the Apes movie is being received pretty well, which in my opinion is always a good thing. Love apes, need more of them, will always appreciate them. Now, don't get me wrong, the original Planet of the Apes movie is actually quite a good movie, but it does have one of the most hilarious B-movie premises you could ever imagine. I believe that the world is better off for treating this seriously, because ever since, we've never really left the Planet of the Apes. And in the 70s, they produced an animated series called Return to the Planet of the Apes. I took a look at the opening episode. If we could momentarily digress and talk about The Simpsons for a sec, it'll all make sense. There's a certain history about adult animation that gets thrown around, that The Simpsons really created the market for it, and from then on, adult animation became the hip new thing. Now, if you're well studied in the medium, you may go like, well, actually, the first adult animated show was Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. But that's not even really the full history, because we've kind of written out what actually happened. You have something like Star Trek the Animated Series, which brought over writers from the original Star Trek and kept the tone and pace of the show. And I know that there is a not undeserved reputation that when they adapt something into animation, they'll add annoying sidekicks and the top out of genre experiences. But then you look at like something like the animated Flash Gordon show, where it's one long serialized story told over a whole season, which is strange because live action shows really wouldn't start doing that until like the 90s. But here you have a cartoon in the 70s doing it, which is weird because from my understanding, this show is kind of trying to pull that off as well. And while the episodes are self-contained, you have to watch them in order because plots and characters return from previous episodes. So what's the first episode about even? It follows 3 astronauts who crash land on a future Earth. And when they crash land, one of the things they do weirdly quite boldly is that it's a long sequence of them just walking through the desert, slowly starving to death, with very little dialogue and mostly instrumental music playing in the background. Now, part of the reason I suspect that there was very little dialogue is that the animation is pretty not there. Yeah, I didn't make that comparison to the Star Trek animated series idly. There is very little actual animation in this. So much so that I initially thought that this was a Filmation production because of its incredibly limited animation and quite beautiful and elaborate backgrounds, which are total Filmation hallmarks. But it turns out it's not. These are the people who produced Johnny Quest. So what are the apes doing while the astronauts are struggling through Earth? Well, they're meeting at Ape Congress to decide what should be done about these humans now that we know they can talk. Part of the reason it's called Return to the Planet of the Apes is because they found evidence of another human who crash landed on Earth. It's also interesting to note that they're depicted with more advanced technology than they are in the original movies. And the original movies were going to do that. They just couldn't because of budgetary reasons. This was a weird experience because I can feel consciously that they're trying to make this a more serious adult version of animation, even though calling it animated is generous at best. It's more like a delightful pan over a pretty rad picture book. Truthfully, I came into this expecting it to be a goofy, over-the-top comedy thing where a group of kids and they've got a one radical ape friend, but no. It turns out this is them trying to be serious and respectable, and I think I really appreciate that and the effort